Jo with My Mom Can, here to walk you through some everyday Cricut tips. Hi, thanks for joining me today at mymomcan.com. So we are here to test out Infusible ink. So I've actually never used it before. Today is my first day using it, so I'm happy you're going to be joining me on this adventure. So I have all of these super cool colors right here that I'm going to choose from. I have one of Cricut's approved blanks, which is 100% polyester, as well as it's white. So according to Cricut, to use Infusible ink, you need to have either a white or a light gray blank because the ink actually dyes the fibers of the garment, whereas something like heat transfer vinyl actually just applies a layer on top of the garment. So it's actually two very different applications. So that's why they suggest using the Cricut approved blank so that you can actually get the best outcome for it. So for the first time I'm using the product, I'm going to use this blank, but I think I'm going to try and play with some other different blanks and shirts and different things once I get comfortable with using Infusible ink. So let's get started. Right, so as we look to start using our Infusible ink, we have to choose our colors. So I think that for the vintage kind of t-shirt look that we want, I think I'm going to go for some of the darker here. So as we talked about, whatever Infusible ink you use on a dark blank has to be darker than the material you're putting it on, or else it's not actually going to take. So taking a look right here, I don't think I can get away with the gray. It is too close. I know I do want that tone on tone look, but I think I got to go for the straight black. So I'm going to do that for these two shirts. And then I think for the blue, let's use a pattern because I actually just really want to see how the patterned ones turn out. And I think we're gonna go for one of the brushed sunset in the darker blue because I think that would just look really cool and it'll give us that vintagey look that we're looking for. And then for the white t-shirt, I think we're just gonna go with the straight pink because you know what? I love pink, it's my favorite color, so let's just see what it looks like. All right, let's go. Okay, so we are going to set up our mat to start printing. So I am opening up one of the Infusible ink packages, and it says on the package to make sure you are using clean, dry hands to store everything in a dark room, so no light. So I'm assuming it's a bit of a fragile material to be working with, so I'm going to try and handle it the least amount as possible, which I know is kind of difficult, but I'm going to try my best. So it does come with the butcher paper that you need when you actually go to transfer it to the garment. So I'm going to pull one sheet out and put one aside because I only need one sheet of the transfer paper. And as you are going to notice when I pull it out, it actually looks a little bit brown. That's because Infusible ink is actually quite dull before you use it. So it'll be interesting to see, and then I'm going to put what I'm not using back in this black container just to make sure that it doesn't degrade. They said it really is light sensitive, so I'm just trying to be pretty good with the material so that it stays in good condition for the next project. So I'm going to go ahead and put this away. There we go. And then whenever I'm printing multiple things, instead of using multiple different mats, what I like to do is actually just use one mat and line up my materials. So what I did is I'm actually going to get my big mat, my 12 by 24, and I'm going to pull off the cover sheet. And you always want to make sure you kind of know which side's the top, so you put it back on appropriately. And then I'm going to try not to handle this very much. So I'm just going to kind of touch it by the corners. And kind of first impression, it feels kind of weird. It's a little bit thicker. It's got a bit of a glossy back to it. And yeah, I guess it just feels a little bit stiffer than what I had expected. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the top down with my brayer. And I'm going to use my brayer to put the rest down to hopefully minimize how much I'm touching the Infusible ink sheet. So I'm going to use my brayer to get that down nice and good to the sheet. And I'm just using my standard grit mat, which is what was recommended by Cricut. Then I am going to be using some other colors as well. So I'm going to put it down, print side up. I'm just going to line it right up. Again, I'm only touching the top, and I'm going to use my brayer. I don't actually know how sensitive it is, but if they put a warning on the side, then I'm assuming you kind of need to watch out. So I'm going to go with that thinking. And then my last sheet. So the one thing to note is that if you are using something that's patterned, make sure you cut it accordingly. So I definitely wanted the brush strokes to go this way. If you wanted it to go this way, then just make sure that you're cutting your material so that it's going the proper way. I know that that seems like you should know to do that, but the amount of times that I've wasted material because I've kind of forgotten, or I mostly with sewing. If you sew, you know that cutting the material the wrong way can always mess up a project. Okay, so I have my mat all set, and then we're gonna start cutting. Okay, so I have set up my image that I want in Design Space, and I want the image to actually be bigger than the 12 inches that the sheet comes in. I want it to extend to the seam of the side seam of the shirt. So I've actually added this secondary line, and that secondary line is what I'm going to use to extend the image out once I'm done printing it. So I'm going to hit Make It. And when you go to Make It, I am going to, since I'm doing 4 shirts, I'm actually going to up the quantity to 4, and I'm going to hit Apply. And as you can see, I actually have 4 different mats set. So I'm going to actually change my material size to 12 by 24, and it's going to show up as 2 mats, and it's because it's moving some of these lines to a different, so I'm actually just going to move the object back up into the first mat so that it cuts together. Move the object, and I'm going to move it back, and it's all kind of just stacking on top of each other on the first mat, which I'm going to go in and I'm going to change that. So I am just going to move some of these. There it is. There's the other one. Okay, so I just want to check. So a lot of them are at the bottom. So I basically need 2 of them for each color. So I'm just going to stack it beside the image so that we can make sure that we are printing some with each color. And I see that these are different sizes, so I'm just going to go ahead and get one for each color kind of set up. And a lot of people don't know that you can kind of maximize your mats by doing this, and this will definitely help save you a lot of material. So once I've done that, I'm going to mirror it. So you're going to mirror what you're doing, very similar to how you do it with heat press vinyl, because the ink that you're using that's facing up is actually going to be facing down when you go to transfer the material, and that's why you need to mirror it. So it's definitely important that you don't forget that, and I always just like to make sure that there's enough kind of space between, since I'm optimizing my mat. And then I am going to hit continue. It's going to automatically connect to my machine via Bluetooth, and it's just sitting there recognizing it right now. And we're going to set the base material. I've actually never worked with Infusible ink before, so I'm going to hit browse material. It's not even part of my favorites. So I'm going to hit Infusible ink, and I see the transfer sheet, so I'm going to click it and hit done. So it says make sure mirror is turned on and material is ink side up, which we have done. We're going to keep it as default pressure. We are going to then load the material, and we want to make sure that we have our fine point blade in our clamp, which we have set already. Now that we have Design Space all set up and ready to print, we're going to get our mat that we have preloaded, and we're going to line up the mat underneath the guides on either side, and then we're gonna hit this flashing load button. It's gonna bring the mat into the machine, and once we do that, the design space will actually recognize that everything is loaded, and you will have the option to hit the go button, and you will see that this nice C is flashing. So we're gonna hit go and start our project. Now that we're done, we can go ahead and take our Infusible ink sheets off of the mat. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I always find watching the printer print is just the greatest thing ever. It's just mesmerizing. So we always want to pull the mat away, not the sheet away from the mat. So we flipped it over, and we are going to pull the mat away from our sheet, and we are touching the back of the Infusible ink sheet, so we don't have to worry about getting handprints on it. I'm just going to be quite gentle with it. Take it a little slow. I'm going to move this sheet and then work on the next one. Okay, and we just have one left. Just turning the mat around just to get it off. And then to make sure that our sheet keeps its stickiness, put our cover back on. One of the things that I always find easiest when putting the cover back on is actually just rolling this cover sheet up. Then finding where it goes on the top, match it up, and then unroll it and stick it. This will keep your mat clean and sticky for all your other projects. So according to the instructions on Cricut's website, what you want to do is actually take the sheet and first cut away anything you're not using. So I've got my scissors. I don't have too much. My design does take up actually quite a lot of the ink sheet. I'm going to put that on the side. Probably cut a little bit out of here. I am afraid of kind of overworking the material though, so I don't want to actually take too much out. So I'm going to put those to the side and use it for another project. And then they say to kind of bend it and crack it a little bit, which I just did, and it seems really, really weird. Just kind of go like this. They say it makes it easier to weed. Let's hope it works. It seems kind of odd. Okay, and then I did actually, I'm going to cut out those two pieces that I'm going to use to extend my pattern because my shirt's more than 12 inches wide. So now that I have so I've kind of cut away everything that's not part of the image that I'm using, then I'm going to get my weeding tool. And so what I'm doing to make sure I'm not actually going to put fingerprints on on what I'm transferring, I'm actually just holding down a part of the image that I'm going to be weeding away. It doesn't actually say tips about weeding, but I'm going to assume you're using the same weeding tips that you use for heat press vinyl, where you want to start from the inside out. So I had heard people say it is tricky, and it definitely is a bit of a tricky weed. There we go. It's kind of like weeding, like a oh, I just shot that across the room. Like a construction. Yeah, it's a very weird feeling, so I kind of get why people are saying that it's a little bit bizarre. So let's keep weeding away. So I don't know if you can hear it, but it's almost like cracking as I pull it away. So that's kind of it's a little bit hard to get up the corner, which is why I guess they tell you to, I'm gonna use my tweezers. Which is why they probably tell you to crack it. Maybe not, maybe it is better to use, yeah, just a dental pick. Okay, go. Let's keep weeding. And again, I'm just actually touching the sticky part on the inside so that I don't get any fingerprints, or minimize the amount of fingerprints that I'm putting on any ink that is going to be transferring over. Okay, interesting. I'm kind of getting the hang of it now. So now that I've kind of gotten used to what it feels like, it's actually much easier to weed. And I do notice that the areas that I kind of cracked it or bent the material prior to weeding is a bit easier to pull up than the area I didn't do. So I didn't really do this corner very well, and it's a little bit harder to get at. So I'm going to actually try in a different spot. Let's crack it, there we go. And then let's see if I can kind of pull it that way. Okay, so that kind of cracking piece then is super important. I'm kind of finding that out. All right. And it seems to be that when you weed it outside or from the inside out, it works. So my sheet is done, and as you can see, it's kind of backwards looking at you, but when I do it this way, it looks like the backing side up. So in theory, I think I printed it right. So let's move over to the heat press and see what the shirt looks like. Now we're ready to put our cut Infusible ink design onto the blank shirt. So this is the Cricut 100% polyester Infusible ink that they sell. So this is what you use to get the optimum quality. And I just want to note, I did wash this shirt before we used this. A tip for crafters everywhere: wash everything before you do anything, okay? Whether it's sewing with fabric or shirts before applying heat transfer vinyl or Infusible ink, it's just like good. It's just good to do. So you want to take your shirt, and they suggest using some cardstock to put in between the layers so that the ink doesn't bleed through the back of your shirt. They suggest using some white cardstock. I'm actually just going to put in 2 sheets just because I really don't want anything on the back of my shirt, so I am going to do that. So I'm just going to get it nice and aligned so I don't really have to move it once I start the process. And I'm just going to make sure that the cardstock goes all the way to the seam, because the design that we are putting on goes all the way to the seam. I'm just going to make sure it's high enough up. There we go. So, next thing that you need to do is take a lint roller and make sure it's actually a fresh sheet, I guess you would call it, and use it on your shirt, because they say like any type of dog hair or little fiber or fluffy from pre-washing your shirt could actually affect the design, and the ink won't stick to that part. So you want to make sure that you do it really, really well. As you can see, there's tons of stuff that's coming up just because I did put it through the wash, so there are some fluffies. So I am definitely glad I'm doing this. So then you put down your butcher paper. So this comes with the Infusible ink sheets. Now our design is actually going to go from one side all the way to the other. My easypress is not as large. So what we're going to do, because you have to do it for 15 seconds on where you're putting the design. So I'm going to do 15 seconds on this side, and then kind of move it over and do 15 seconds on the other side. Forgot I hit go, but I know I probably already had it on for a few seconds. So let's count down. So it does have a timer. The easypress, if you're using your iron, make sure you check out what the Infusible ink guide is on Cricut.com, and it'll be able to tell you what you need to do. But when you preheat your material, what it does is it actually just makes sure that there's no moisture in your shirt, and it makes sure that when you're putting your design on, you're doing it on also an entirely flat surface. I recently got an easypress. Before that I was using an iron and it just didn't get the same results. Here we go. Okay, so using your easypress, you want to press it for 15 seconds, which is what I just did, on the area to make sure that your fabric is prepared, and you want to make sure that it cools completely before you put your design down. So that's what we're waiting for it to do right now. And then we're going to preheat our easypress to 385 degrees, and you are going to press your design down for 40 seconds. I'm just going to make sure it's not quite cool yet. So we're going to get it ready. So this is the weeded design that we are putting on our shirt. And as I mentioned, the sheets only come in 12-inch lengths, and unfortunately the shirt's a little bit longer than 12 inches, and I wanted the design to go all the way edge to edge. So what I've done, I've actually printed out an extender that I'm going to line up and put down, and actually looking at it now, while we wait for it to cool, you can't overlap any of your transfer tape. So I'm actually going to cut it as close to the ink as I can get, just so that when I match it up, it matches up perfectly. And I need to do this on the other side here. See, this is the thing with doing something for the first time, is I don't always get it right on the first go, so you guys are learning with me. So you don't make the same mistakes I do. All right, so I know there are a lot of ways that you can find the center. There still is a bit of a press seam in mine, so I can eyeball it pretty easily. But if you're not comfortable eyeballing, or you really want to make sure that you get it in the center, the trick is just to fold it in half, use your heat press to make a seam, and then you know the exact center point. So since the garment is cool, I'm going to take my design and I'm going to lay it down. Okay, and it does have a grid so that you can kind of make sure that it's center. Whereas I do also like to use my straight edge. So I'm just going to use my straight edge. I'm looking at it against the grid. We are perfect, and we're perfectly down the ampersand. So it worked out pretty well. Kind of make sure it's down. Then I'm going to take these side pieces and try to make sure it's fully lined up. Is this one I'm going to have to cut down a little bit because it's just on the seam of the sleeve, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do the curve of the sleeve just so that it's like a really neat look to it and it doesn't have like a weird cut off. So let's just get that down. Okay, and then you need to take your butcher paper, and your butcher paper has to be larger than your heat press. So use the one that they give you if it comes with it. So I'm going to do actually this side first. And you say apply light pressure for 40 seconds. So I've set the timer to go on my heat press. All right, now we wait. You have to let it cool completely before you touch it. And as you can see, some of the transfer tape is actually kind of coming up, or the backing, or whatever you want to call it, is kind of coming up. So I can see some of the design. So I kind of want to touch it, but I know I can't. Okay, should we do it? I think we should. Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. Okay. gosh, it looks amazing. Okay, so you can see. Oh, I love it. Okay, let's take the cardboard out of the middle. This is so cool. Okay, so take a look. How great is that? So that's exactly what I want it to look like. And it looks like it's a very vibrant color. So if you remember, the sheet when we were cutting it wasn't that vibrant, but as you can tell, it matches actually the color pretty well. If not, maybe it's a little bit bolder than the preview color. So if we're gonna kind of learn from this shirt, if you can see where I actually attached the little pieces on the side, there is like a slight line, so I probably could do better about kind of matching it up next time. And there's a teensy bit of kind of a funky spot right at the top there, where you can see a little bit where I probably handled it when I shouldn't have. But let's do the stretch test. Stretches perfectly. That's amazing. Okay, so overall I'm incredibly happy with the first go at using Infusible ink. So I would definitely recommend using it. This looks really cool. And then stay tuned, I'm gonna do a before and after picture of what it looks like going through the wash. So if you would like any more tips on using Cricut products or Infusible ink, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or check out mymomcan.com.
And I'm Joe. If you want your child to say, "My mom can do anything," check out mymomcan.com.